Und damit herzlich willkommen zu einem neuen Reaktionsvideo. Ich habe mir mal wieder Essen im Stream gemacht, hatte Bock auf was zu reagieren. Der Juli war so nett und hat mir ein Video geschickt. Es ist zwar auf Englisch, aber er findet das immer interessant. Wie wir alle wissen, kann ich kein Englisch. Nicht. Ja. Ja, man sieht, ich habe eigentlich nur noch die halbe Pizza, weil ich ja während der Aufnahme vorher bei Red Dead ja schon ein bisschen was gesnackt habe zwischendurch. Naja, rein da.
Popularity of Super Mario 64 speedrunning, there is a comparatively small amount of people running the blindfolded categories, a testament to how difficult blindfolded speedrunning really is. And so it was surprising when I was on Twitch this week and was notified of another runner doing blindfolded 16-star runs. Blindfolded
Diese Speedrunner, was Nintendo-Games angeht, sind auch teilweise so krank, ne?
runs of Super Mario 64 have recently been made popular by a small but extremely dedicated group of runners. However, there are clear differences between the runs that those already established players have done and the runs that this particular person is completing. The main difference, of course, being that this particular
Aber man hört nichts. Ups, jetzt.
established players have done and the runs that this particular person is completing. The main difference, of course, being that this particular runner is creating fake runs and attempting to pass them off as real. I have here a video of one of these runs.
Und ich sollte natürlich auch auf das Chatting gehen. Wie war das eigentlich nochmal mit deinem Run? Was war das nochmal? Mit Phil damals, diese Wette? Wie viele Sterne in wie vielen Minuten?
And I aim to show some of the clear discrepancies between this run and the genuine blindfolded runs of SM64 that are out there. When watching this run, it's important to note that the author claims not to have practiced blindfolded speedrunning much at all, and that this is apparently only his third blindfolded run. He claims to make up for this with the fact that he's been playing Super Mario 64 for the past 3.5 years. However, it should be noted that despite the
Jetzt check ich das erst. Der spielt ja blind, Alter. Also nicht, dass er das Game nicht kennt, sondern blindfolded.
time he has spent on the game, the best time on a run he has currently submitted is in 1826, a relatively mid-level time for 16-star. The first thing that actually
20 Minuten für das Game. Scheiße. Ja, aber er hat's gefaked.
put me off when I was watching this run was the fact that the streamer had both follow alerts and text-to-speech alerts on.
Let's go.
Thank you for the follow.
If you've ever seen a blindfolded speedrun before, you will know that runners pretty much always have these kind of sound alerts turned off. Considering how important sound cues are when you literally can't see, you would think that he would do the same. However, this guy is
Okay. Da wird man schon so ein bisschen verdächtig wahrscheinlich, ne? Komisch, dass er Sound-Alerts anhat.
so good he apparently doesn't even need clear sound cues to do the run. Throughout this run, he also attempts multiple times to explain the strategies that he's been using, except there are multiple problems with what he's saying
Wild Guess? Er hat's vorher aufgenommen. Und dann einfach so getan-mäßig.
versus the things he's actually doing. He mainly claims to be using a combination of sound cues and muscle memory for most of his strats. Most speedrunners know, however, that visual cues in particular are just as important as muscle memory in many cases. It's very unrealistic to assume that anyone could just casually do a blindfolded run off of visual muscle memory alone, no matter how long that person has been playing.
I've tried to do stars. I can't do 1-star blindfolded. Like, even though I've played this game for years and years and years, even trying to do 1-star blindfolded is insanely difficult.
Blindfolded speedruns often employ what are called normalized strategies. A normalized strategy is any strat that is done in such a way that the outcome is always exactly the same. In Super Mario 64, many of these kinds of strategies can be employed. For example, moving in a cardinal direction on a controller with notches, using 2 slow walks to ledge grab at the corner of a platform, or punching against a wall to push Mario backwards a fixed distance are all normalized strats. As you can imagine, these kinds of strats are often completely different from the ones you would see in a normal run, and require hundreds of hours to properly learn. And yet this person is claiming to have a 33-minute time after openly admitting to having little to no preparation. Keep that in mind when you look at the so-called blindfolded strats that are claimed to be employed here. The run begins in Bob-omb Battlefield with Behind the Chain Chomp's Gate. Looking at a legitimate example by Bubsia, you can see that a consistent setup with clear intention is being used in order to get onto the Chain Chomp's pole. Note the use of a notched angle and fixed camera in order to guarantee a direct path to the pole from the corner of the gate. Comparatively, this runner seemed to have absolutely no normalized setup whatsoever. He takes what looks like either an intentional death or a legitimate mistake, and then tries again a second time. This time around, he seems to be using an almost completely different,
Okay, dann wahrscheinlich doch nicht pre-recorded, ne? Oder er wollte es halt nicht allzu offensichtlich machen. Wie der halt gerade auch gesagt hat, ne? Dass es halt intentional war. Ja?
still unnormalized setup to get onto the pole. The unexpected hit that he takes here from the chain chomp should have immediately thrown him off, and yet he is somehow still able to turn around and recover. The runner seems to be using
Kann immer noch beides sein, ne? Also, ja.
intentional mistakes along with fake setups to try to sell the idea that he's actually blindfolded. Many more of these will come up throughout the run. The run is already off to a suspicious start. However, the first absolutely massive red flag appears in Womp's Fortress when the runner decides to opt for Owlless, a strat usually reserved for sighted runs. It should be
Hello
noted
there.
how much the runner is talking during this very input-heavy and spacing-dependent section.
Den
check
gucken wir
for
uns gerade an.
saves. No,
Und
because
moin.
I don't save the game.
Again, anyone who has watched a real blindfolded speedrun before knows how quiet runners tend to be during difficult sections. With how much focus and skill are required to complete a blindfolded run, it's an anomaly that this runner with barely any practice is so casually able to do a strat that no other blindfolded runner has attempted.
Aber hat er nicht vorhin noch gesagt, er hat schon ein paar Speedruns gemacht? Also normale? Gut, aber wer weiß, wie oft er das sonst so gespielt hat. Aber ja, die Zeichen stehen ja ganz schlecht für ihn.
Absolutely no normalized strats, he seems to do everything with some relative ease. Looking at a run that this same runner has done without a blindfold, you can actually see that he can do the exact
Safe auf jeden Fall. Sind normal und blind zwei Welten. Ich könnte nicht mal normal Speedrun in Mario machen. Liegt aber auch daran, dass ich es nicht so krass gezockt habe. Und mein genereller Skill.
same movements, blindfold or not. His muscle memory must really be that good. On his first attempt,
Ich habe vorher schon gefragt, was die Wette nochmal war zwischen euch, aber er hat nicht geantwortet.
he is able to triple jump wall kick up to the
Waren wir,
floating
glaub, alle
island
dabei,
without
ne?
giving himself any
Im
sort
Chat
of
damals.
indication where he is. With absolutely no normalization, he's able to attempt and fail Owlless 3 times before finally landing it a 4th time. He even comments on the fact that he should probably learn how to use the owl blindfolded.
Maybe I should learn how to just ride the owl.
Ich glaube, er meinte erst 30 Minuten, dann habe ich Rekord gegoogelt und er ist auf 2 Stunden gegangen. Okay, er hat gerade auch im Kopf, die haben ja vorher gesagt, also ich glaube, er hier hat er auch in 30 Minuten. Nee, 18.
It's anyone's guess why he didn't opt to learn this much more consistent strat in the first place. In the next star, he goes for the
Unter 3
traditional
Stunden bin am
cannonless
Tekken
setup that
ranked.
you would normally see in most sighted runs. Once again, looking at a blindfolded version of this strat, there is a clear intention with every input.
Also dadurch, dass man ja weiß jetzt, dass er gecheatet hat, er wird einige Sachen mit Absicht so gemacht haben, so, oh scheiße, ich habe gefailt, naja, ist halt, ne, blindfolded und so, ja,
Using
passiert.
normalized movements and guaranteed setups. Looking back at this run, however, the movement across the falling bridge and over to the piranha plant is extremely wobbly and very inconsistent. He then lines up next to the plank using these extremely small adjustments that have no audio cues whatsoever, for knows that it's pretty precise. The only possible way anyone could do it blindfolded with the movement used here would be if they weren't actually blindfolded at all, and were instead using a distinctly visual cue. The run only gets more and more.
Also wahrscheinlich kommt jetzt noch am Ende des Videos oder im Laufe des Videos, wie er gefaked hat. Wie gesagt, mein Guess war ja, also der erste, er hat es pre-recorded, ja, und hat dann einfach so gemacht, so Gut, ist aber auch schwierig, weil du musst ja dann trotzdem sehen, was passiert jetzt gerade in dem Pre-Record-Video, oder sein Blindfold ist halt durchsichtig.
Suspicious from this point onward. Following a couple more extremely wonky and unnormalized setups in Cool Mountain, we reach Bowser in the Dark World, the first Bowser stage. Here,
Klingt jetzt aber so,
only a
als würden
true
sie es gar
gamer
nicht
such as
sagen.
this man would be able to somehow sidestep this Goomba, quickly make his way up the path, and then do this long jump to the next red, all completely blindfolded and with absolutely no setup
Ja.
necessary. Simply amazing.
I heard you, Goomba.
Also ich glaube, Leute, die sich damit aktiv beschäftigen, haben schon sehr früh Zweifel wahrscheinlich gehabt. So, ich meine, ich kenne mich jetzt gar nicht damit aus. Ich hätte wahrscheinlich gesagt, okay, ist ein krasser Typ, der hat's voll drauf, Alter. So, aber mit den Hintergrundinfos, die der Sprecher jetzt halt gibt, ist einem schon klar, okay, das ist ja eigentlich unschaffbar so.
Then punches a Goomba that he claims he heard, even though there is no good way of gauging distance that precise with sound cues in SM64. It would have probably been both faster and safer to just keep walking forward anyway. Notice then the small adjustment he makes in order to be lined up with the final slope.
Ich kann da ja nicht so mitreden, weil ich das so Themen ja gar nicht verfolge eigentlich. Aber das Video ist interessant. Und er blendet ja zwischendurch auch andere ein, die es tatsächlich machen. Ne? Man hat ja auch am Anfang gesagt, so hier, guck, normale Blind Runner, die machen ihre Sound Alerts und sowas aus. Also, ne, da gibt's jetzt nicht sowas hier. Also vielleicht für euch, aber er selber hört das wahrscheinlich nicht.
Actually blindfolded here would have almost certainly kept holding right with no adjustment. And yet this man somehow knew he was just a little too
Ich
far
steh
down,
auf diese
despite
ganze
having
Scheiße.
absolutely no real setup beforehand. If none of this was suspicious enough, then next we have the first Bowser throw. Looking at legitimate runs by Katoon and Bubsia, we can see that a setup is being used to slowly move Bowser into the bomb without even throwing him. For a faster strat, you can also toss him a little earlier with a slower spin, which provides a much larger frame window than normal to hit the throw. It should be noted that there is also a consistent way to throw Bowser.
Spin Bowser at max speed. Blend mich kurz aus. Keeping an analog stick at notch. Pause on a certain frame. Digga, du musst ja auf so viel achten, Alter. Steht die Hälfte schon nicht, was da steht.
At full speed, using a combination of pause buffering and a sound cue. When Mario is spinning Bowser, a distinctive whoosh noise will play. This noise will always play whenever Bowser faces north, regardless of the camera angle or Bowser's orientation when grabbing him. Furthermore, the whoosh will make a slightly different sound depending on what frame you pause on.
Okay. Digga. Also ja, man hört den Unterschied, aber Digga, auf sowas, Respekt. Also, Junge.
And it's how he's able to consistently pause buffer a B press to throw Bowser into the bomb. However, it seems like this runner couldn't be bothered to learn any of these strats. He instead opts to throw Bowser in the conventional way, while claiming to also be using a sound cue. Notice, however, that he also opts to turn his camera towards the bomb. As explained, turning the camera during spins does not affect the timing of any audio cues, and so it would be pointless to do this if the runner was truly blindfolded. It's pretty obvious here that he's just turning the camera so he can visually see when to throw. Moving on to basement, we see another series of extremely suspicious and inconsistent setups. In Shifting Sandland, he is somehow able to get the Talon Star using a strategy only viable for visual runs. The amount of adjustment needed to long jump to the Fly Guy and twirl over to Klepto is simply too precise to be done consistently in a blindfolded run. That doesn't stop this guy though. He's able to do it first try with no issues. In Hazy Maze Cave, however, he reverts back to setups that might pass as blindfolded to try to further sell the idea that he cannot see. However, the quote-unquote setups he is using make absolutely no sense. On the emergency exit star, he seems to have created some kind of fake counting system involving more unnormalized and inconsistent movements.
Okay. 1, 2...
Compare this again to Nobori's strat, which uses normalized movements along with the game's fixed camera option for even more consistent angles. Up to this point, the run has been extremely suspect at best. However, what happens in the second half absolutely destroys what little credibility it had in the first place. The last half of this run is so blatantly fake that
Dieses Kameradrehen, also er hat ja vorher bei Bowser gesagt, das hat er wahrscheinlich selber gemacht. Das, was er jetzt hier gerade macht, ist wahrscheinlich auch durch ihn selber, oder kommt das so bei dem anderen?
it makes the previous 20 minutes look completely legit by comparison.
And... Yes! Oh, come on, let's go.
We now come to Mip's clip, in my opinion one of the most impressive sections of Blindfolded 16 star. Successfully doing Mip's clip in a real blindfolded speedrun requires an extremely precise setup involving walking into a corner with the correct camera angle, and then repeatedly re-grabbing Mip's to achieve the correct spacing on the door. This is one of the most difficult and precise sections in the entire run. In the castle basement, even the tiniest mistap to the left or right can mess up your camera entirely, breaking any setup.
Beziehungsweise wurde mir ein Video von Hand of Blood vorgeschlagen, wo er auf Speedruns reagiert von Elden Ring. Habe ich mir noch nicht angeguckt oder habe ich mir nicht angeguckt, aber oder No-Hit von allen Souls. Ja, Digga, das ist krass. Also, da habe ich ja Ausschnitte gesehen. Deswegen wusste ich ja auch, dass einer diesen Dark Souls No-Hit-Run gemacht hat und dann irgendwie im dritten Teil getroffen wurde und alles nochmal neu machen musste. Digga. Oh, da bist du, glaube ich, auch so am Arsch dann. Du denkst, fuck, Alter, 2 Spiele jetzt geschafft und dann in diesem fucking dritten muss ich einfach von vorne anfangen. Jo.
You may have had. This runner, however, throws all of that out the window. To clip through the basement door, he basically just runs straight at it and ends up in the right spot. No setup needed. Remember that there are absolutely zero sound cues here. There is absolutely...
Ja, wollte gerade sagen, also ich wollte gerade fragen, gibt's da irgendwelche Sounds, wenn du das da dagegen rennst, aber er hat's ja gerade bestätigt, gibt's nicht.
No way he can know how close or far away he is from the door, because he is using literally no setup here. The exact same is true for his clip through the 30-star door. Once again, with absolutely no discernible audio cues and no real setup whatsoever.
Na, hier auch jetzt bei ihm im Chat. Holy fuck, James, you're a good damn... God, good, genau, good. Ja, ich sage ja, ich kann kein Englisch. You're a goddamn legend with the blindfolded. Ja, wenn man es ihm abkauft, mit Sicherheit, ja, dann wirkt es überkrass. Und wahrscheinlich wäre es echt gewesen, wäre es auch der Shit schlechthin.
Back and forth along the door, and somehow is able to find the exact right spot to make it through. Somehow it still gets worse after this. At this point, he pretty much goes through the rest of the game without even thinking about what a real blindfolded run should look like. It really looks like he's just given up on trying to sell the illusion any further. He approaches the submarine in Dire Dire Docks from a seemingly random angle, and then tries to make it look like he knows where he is by jumping at it.
I slid off something. Oh fuck, am I at the submarine? Yes, okay.
The fact that he even says this is strange to me. There is literally nothing else in this level that you can slide off besides the sub, so it doesn't really make any sense to act as if he had to figure out what he was sliding on. He needed to make it look like he had some kind of cue to go off of, and then did the absolute bare minimum to try to make it convincing. He then approaches the back of the sub as you would in a normal speedrun, but he ends up under the fin, causing the camera to go in an awkward direction. It should be painfully obvious how bad this looks. A real blindfolded runner would be completely disoriented in this situation, and there is no consistent way you could realistically recover from this. Despite this, he is somehow able to loop back around at the perfect angle and lands back on the fin, once again with absolutely zero sound cues or any setup. Nothing suspicious to see here. And then there's Fire Sea.
That was literally just muscle.
Dass aber auch keiner im Chat da drauf kommt, ne? Man muss ja überlegen, es müssen ja eigentlich Leute sein, die sich auch für sowas interessieren. Also der wird wahrscheinlich fast nur so Content machen und dann natürlich auch Leute anziehen, die sich dafür interessieren. Dass es auch im Chat da keinem aufgefallen ist. Oder es wurde natürlich alles weggebannt. Das kann natürlich auch sein. Weißt du, so Nachrichten wie, ja, du bist doch gar nicht blind.
Right. So after some more fake strats in Fire Sea, one fake Bowser throw setup, and some suspicious BLJ lineups, we finally come to what manages to be the worst part of the run by far. This run's Bowser in the Sky is pure gold. It contains such a large amount of glaring flaws and inconsistencies that it's insane that anyone could look at it and believe that the person playing could not actually see. He immediately starts the course with, again, completely unnormalized strats, moving through the course with small adjustments that have seemingly no explanation. He then commits what is possibly the most obvious and completely shameless move in the entire run.
Fuck, I didn't get that extra life.
I was laughing my ass off when I first saw this. Not only does he somehow know exactly where the 1-up box is, but he also knows exactly what direction the 1-up will go in once it spawns, something completely determined by RNG. Then, after chasing it on a moving platform for a completely arbitrary amount of time, he somehow knows exactly when and where to jump to the left. You don't even need to know anything about Super Mario 64 or blindfolded speedrunning to understand that what just happened is completely bullshit. Immediately after skipping the first 1-up, he messes around on the first rotating
Also mit dem Extraleben, was da wegfliegt, dass er direkt in dieselbe Richtung rennt. Hat er recht, da brauchen wir wirklich keine Ahnung.
elevator, grabbing the next 1-up in the process.
Yes, okay.
All clearly a calculated setup. After this, he once again makes an intentional mistake in order to make people think he's actually blindfolded.
I fell off. I can tell I fell off.
This is somehow the first and only time in this 40-minute run that he accidentally runs off of a platform. Except immediately after falling off, he somehow also knows to pull back to the right so he doesn't fall all the way down. Only then does he comment that he knows he's fallen down, again with absolutely no discernible sound cues. Following this, he traverses the wooden platforms and tries to go for yet another 1-up.
There should be a life on one of these.
He clearly saw this 1-up with his eyes, but then remembered he was supposed to be blindfolded. So he passes it off by acting like he knew there should be a 1-up there and goes back to grab it. Again, no setup whatsoever.
Ja gut, da könnte man jetzt noch sagen, er weiß, dass es da ungefähr in der Ecke ist halt hingelaufen, kam kein Geräusch, ja.
Ah, got it.
He somehow knows exactly where he is on the spinning platform and knows exactly where the first pole is. Again, anyone who is actually blindfolded here would have probably just kept holding left and run off. However, this guy is able to make a completely random amount of adjustments to make it onto the pole. He then makes his way to the next pole and grabs the red, which he seems to be using as an audio cue.
Okay, I know what pole I'm at.
Then, immediately after jumping off of the pole that he knows he was just on, he attempts to use 2 bob-ombs on the next platform to further determine his position.
There should be, like, some bomb-bombs up? Yes, okay.
This is absolutely pointless, as he had already just verified where he was. All he had to do here was hold forward and he would have reached the next wall. At this point, he once again reiterates the fact that this is only his third blindfolded run ever.
This is your second blindfolded run, isn't it?
Technically this is my third. The first one I did was like, I don't know. I don't remember how long it took me.
In the last 4 minutes alone, there have been countless points of extreme suspicion. From the moment he enters the stage to the moment he enters the final pipe, there is almost nothing that could be considered even.
Hat der das Video jetzt gemacht hat, also dieses YouTube-Video, was wir uns jetzt gerade angucken, hat der das aufgedeckt oder war das schon vorher bekannt, dass er da gecheatet hat?
Remotely legitimate. However, the final Bowser throws that he does in the next 4 minutes are somehow even worse. He begins by grabbing Bowser using the normal visual method. Running around Bowser with a tight enough circle to grab him is something that heavily relies on visual cues to properly do. This is why in a real blindfolded run, a setup is used for the first 2 grabs that involves luring Bowser to a bomb from the edge of the platform. For the final throw, a separate normalized setup is used. And yet, after only 1 miss, this person is able to grab Bowser in the normal way, no problem. Note that after this first mistake, he does not miss a single tail.
Aber da frage ich mich auch immer, es gibt ja diese Tricks, die du halt anwenden musst. Wer kommt da drauf?
Grab for the rest of the fight. He then winds up for the first throw and misses. Once a throw is missed, Bowser will jump back onto the stage differently depending on where he fell off. There isn't a very good way to account for this, so the only real backup is to run off and try again from the beginning. But this guy doesn't do that. He instead goes for a regrab and gets it, again with no setup and no sound cues. He hits the throw on his second try, again using the normal visual method of throwing. During his second throw, he stops and talks for about 30 seconds to explain how he first learned to speedrun
How often
blindfolded.
have you practiced outside of stream while blindfolded? A viewer is asking.
Actually not a lot. I feel like if I practiced more, I'd be a lot better at it. Most of this is just muscle memory and listening to the audio cues. But I've been speedrunning and playing Mario 64 for 3.5 years solid. So like I could, and well, during streams I would like, because I knew before I did my first blindfolded run stream, I would test myself by just like looking at my other monitor or just looking at like away from the TV and doing the run.
He is once again constantly talking during a section that should take an extreme amount of focus to execute. And yet he still figures out exactly when he needs to throw Bowser.
Oh fuck yeah.
After messing around for another minute, he then gets another regrab, once again with no setup or any possible audio cues. During the final throw, he turns the camera not once, but twice to visually aim at 2 separate bombs. He then goes on yet another explanation about how he's able to do Bowser throws the way he's doing them.
So what I'm doing right now, the reason why it's taken me so long to throw him is because I'm trying to time it based on like where my thumb is on the controller, on the thumbstick, because that's typically like a right around where Mario is, like the direction that he's gonna throw. So I need it to be like, if I think the bomb is where I think it is, if the bomb is where I think it is, and I'm looking at it,
Das da, wo der Daumen ist, ist Mario. Was?
then
Obviously none of this makes sense in the first place, but he is directly contradicting himself here. Here he says something vague about using where his thumb is on the stick to know where Bowser is, which already makes no sense on its own, except he also mentioned in his first Bowser throw that he was using sound cues.
Bowser is a little bit tricky. The sound cues on this is actually kind of hard. Okay.
This whole time, he's just been giving fake technical explanations to try to convince his viewers that he actually knows what he's doing. Except he also misses this throw
Ja, weiß er ja auch, weil er halt sieht.
because he was too far away to ever hit the bomb in the first place, something he probably should have known whether he could actually see or not. Maybe he's only pretending to be blindfolded so he can hide the fact that he sucks at Bowser throws.
Oh. Fuck, okay.
He eventually does land the last throw, luckily avoiding all the fire on the ground and barely avoiding running off the edge. Nothing but pure skill and game sense. After the run is over, he is challenged multiple times by one of the only doubters in his chat. He is asked to verify that he can actually do blindfolded Bowser throws, but refuses to do even the simplest test to prove it.
See, so would you be opposed to doing Bowser in the sky and throws while you'll give me $50? if I do it turned around with a blanket over my head?
Na?
No.
Also der Denkprozess gerade bei ihm war auch so, scheiße, was mache ich jetzt?
Despite the glaring flaws in this person's gameplay, he has somehow been able to convince all but a few of his viewers that his Blindfolded runs are legit. Messages in his Twitch and Facebook gaming chats show that most of the people watching him are...
Gut, er ist, also man sieht ja jetzt, dass er die Binde abgenommen hat. So, er guckt dann so ein bisschen so, ne? Ja gut, ja, ich sag da jetzt nicht. Ich wollte eigentlich sagen so, ja, man ist wahrscheinlich da ein bisschen lichtempfindlicher, weil er hat ja bestimmt auch hier Lights und so an, ne, dass er schön ausgeleuchtet ist. Digga, wie lang? 40 Minuten, ne, war der jetzt blind, hat nichts gesehen. Digga, ich glaube, da wird es erstmal so. Warte mal, wenn ich mir das jetzt nochmal angucke. Bin ich jetzt doof?
one of the only doubters in his chat.
So,
He's
jetzt
asked
sieht das doch
to
ab.
verify that he can actually do blindfolded
Ja, ich bin da nix auf der Spur.
viewers that his blindfolded runs are legit. Messages in his Twitch and Facebook gaming chats show that most of the people watching him are completely convinced that what they're seeing is real. The best I can possibly assume in this situation is that he may actually be doing some of these parts at least partially blindfolded, only peeking through the blindfold whenever he's completely lost or doesn't know what to do. It's either that or the blindfold is just completely see-through, and his only goal during the run is to make it look like he can't actually see. I almost thought this run was a joke, but it's clear from the way he's talking about his gameplay that he's completely serious. I can only speculate on this person's motives for faking these runs, but my best guess is that he's doing it for either the money or the views. It should be noted that during the run, the only way to communicate with him was to donate bits to play a text-to-speech message on stream. Considering the run is fake, this just seems like a scummy way for him to take money from people, but honestly for only 1 bit per message it doesn't really seem that bad. If the amount was any higher, I would probably have a much bigger problem with it. But whatever small amount of money
Habe ich das gerade richtig verstanden? Du musst pro Nachricht Bits bezahlen? Okay.
he did collect is probably the least
Yet
of our
flex.
worries here. There hasn't been a notable cheating incident in the Mario 64 community for a few years now, so I guess we were about due for another one. By faking this run, this person has not only made a complete mockery of blindfolded speedrunning, but has also detracted from the hard work of people who have actually put in the insane amount of time needed to do this for real. This particular run ended with a 42-minute time, however he claims to have completed a faster time of 33:23, a time which would be considered second place on the current leaderboards. When asked if he will submit the time, however, he claimed that he wants to take
Ja, was
first
ein
place
Zinken,
before he
oder?
makes any submissions. I trust, however, that the mods of the category are smart enough to see that any run he submits will be clearly invalid. Though I wouldn't be surprised if he never even submits a run, because he probably knows that it would never get verified anyway. If you happen to see this guy on Twitch or anywhere else, please just don't interact with him. I've intentionally left his name out of this video, 1 because I don't wish for anyone to harass him over this, and 2 because I don't believe that any cheater deserves attention past simply being exposed.
Also wird das auch nie
I
zugegeben
want to
haben
give a big
wahrscheinlich.
shout out. If you please, you can also subscribe to this channel and check me out over on Twitch. My runs aren't quite as cool as these guys yet, but we'll still have some fun.
Ah, schönes Laute und Aufgedrehte noch einblenden. Das zeigt, bei dem Typ geht's ab. Christen-Like. Der hat 300.000 Likes. Nicht schlecht, nicht schlecht.
Alles Alex ist immer noch da, immer noch mit seiner Vlog-Kamera. Also lass mir mal bitte ein Abo da. Oder verschwinde, ganz einfach. Kannst du links klicken oder kannst du auch hier rechts klicken. Dann kommst du zum nächsten Video oder auch nicht. Jetzt verschwind. Gell? Also, gell?